So Andre, I think a lot of people still think of PhoneGap as take my website, wrap it in a shell, throw it up there, but you've got a lot of ways to get native code in there as well. Can you talk about plugins and what you're doing there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to use PhoneGap. And just for the record, we don't tell people to just take their mobile website and wrap it in PhoneGap. Your results will be suboptimal, I promise you. You know, you have to architect your app to be built in a mobile context, kind of a single screen, single page kind of website. But in terms of native, we believe in the web. We believe very strongly in the web and JavaScript as a platform. We want PhoneGap to push web browsers forward, and that's all us. That's great, and it's kind of an altruistic goal. But really, today, there are limitations to what you can do in mobile web. So with PhoneGap, you write your HTML and JavaScript application. You have JavaScript APIs for all your kind of basic APIs, like geolocation, contacts, camera, accelerometer. These are kind of the core things most apps use. When we create those APIs, we look at what's going on in the W3C, so that as the browsers adopt these same APIs, the code you write for your PhoneGap app today will run in the browser in the future, which we're strong believers in. And as part of Adobe, we're contributing to WebKit and the W3C, so we're seeing that change happen faster. But at any time there's some limitation to your PhoneGap app, you can write or get from the open source community a plugin. I think there's about 200 different native plugins, which you just drop this bit of native code into your project, and now you have a JavaScript API for it. And those plugins range from things from native UI, like menus or tab bars, to barcode scanners, social logins, in-app payment, camera stuff, in-app payment, all sorts of things. So that's one way, and you can of course write your own native code. So any portion of your app can be HTML and JavaScript, and a certain portion can be native as well. Even all the PhoneGap APIs that exist today are written as native plugins to the PhoneGap project. You can also take your existing native app and embed PhoneGap into it, so you can start adding HTML and JavaScript content, or the content that's refreshing, if it's like login screens or kind of more business logic stuff that's coming from the server, can be brought into your PhoneGap app that way too. So it can be primarily native with some PhoneGap on the side, or you can start with mostly PhoneGap and add native bits into it. And that approach is something that's evolved out of development with the community, because people have found the benefits of both HTML and JavaScript, and then the need for native components today. And over time, we hope that shifts in the favor of the web, but we'll just keep working on it, really.
So Abe, we talked a little bit about how the WebKit of the past, of Android 2.x, and of back when Jeff got started, was really sort of not that great. If people were just targeting iPhone 5 and modern Androids, would they have a different experience, do you think? Is the modern mobile WebKit really great now?
I think it is. I think it's getting better as well. So Jeff and I met when we basically both moved into the Bay Area, and we were trying to use Titanium to launch some of our desktop products as well. And even back then, it was a little bit of a struggle, but we really persevered through it, and we bet on the web, we bet on WebKit, and we came out with our own desktop packager as well. And we've been able to release Architect, which is our drag and drop application builder, and Animator, all based off of WebKit technology, all delivered as a wrapped app for the desktop. And that experience, you couldn't tell the difference between a native app or an application that's written for the web. So that's why I continue to feel even more and more strongly that the web is the future. And I think that building these experiences and these it's really view technology is going to get to the point where the views themselves are butter, right? And, like they say.
So what's the solution for having to support those old Android devices that are still having a large amount of share, the Android 2.x series? Can we get away with ignoring them and give them a lower grade experience?
No, but that's our problem. We build a framework for developers to make their lives easier, and I think at the end of the day, we've found ways to work around that. Sometimes it's using the GPU if it's available, and then sometimes not if the device is underpowered. So there's multiple different ways around a problem, and we make it so that developers don't have to bang their heads against the walls. We have enough black and blues on our foreheads to do that. So, and at the end of the day, we're about creating these amazing experiences for developers. So, even on older Android 2.1, I know when Dave was with us, we stayed up many late nights getting it perfect, and that's what we're about, and I think that's where the future's heading as well.
So we've talked about how native kind of has an advantage on the UI side and being able to get that perfect, pixel perfect, David called it, and just the experience. One of the massive advantages for the web is being able to deploy things whenever you want, having to call your Apple rep to get something expedited on Black Friday. Not that we would ever do that. You can push the button and you can get it out there. And then, of course, on top of that, you can do great A/B testing and the like. So Bill Scott had a question that was asking, like, so in the native world, can you do that kind of thing? Can you do any A/B testing? Like, how do you test things? How do you kind of progressively improve the product?
It's hard. It doesn't work well in the native app world.
Unless you're using Titanium, it does.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it, but you're constantly putting in code. You're having to double up on your testing of the different experiences, and then you're getting them out there and you're testing, and then in the next version you're wanting to take it out, so over time you don't get bloated. So that's another thing that for eBay, the mobile web will become more and more important as a proxy for our native apps, and doing some testing of different views that we might have or different pieces of functionality. It's easier to do in the mobile web environment.
So Jeff, I wanted to follow up with your comment. One of the things I love about Titanium in concept is that it's all JavaScript, right? And so you get it approved through the App Store, it looks native, it feels native, but if at runtime I wanted to download a whole new set of JavaScript, I could transform the app. How does Apple view that? Am I totally free to do that? Will Apple sort of reject me if they catch me?
Yeah, there's the technical, what you can do, and then there's what Apple allows you to do. Yeah. And that's the case where there's native or JavaScript or HTML that's wrapped in something like PhoneGap, right? So, yeah, I mean, what typically most people do is they make REST-oriented, JSON-oriented calls to the server, and they dynamically construct the UI, much like you would do in Facebook for fragments of code that you might render in native UI kit, right? So it's a similar approach. It is harder because you have to pre-plan, but it's harder in the web too. I mean, so you have to separate A/B testing from immediate deployment, because I think they're similar, but they're different problems. So you can do A/B testing. It's harder. It does take more pre-planning. I mean, we have some customers that will fetch a database web service call, read JSON and dynamically build their interface, and then write it locally so that if they're not online, they can still re-render it later. I mean, that does take design, and it does take upfront, but it's entirely possible. With Apple, they seem to be there's no clear delineation or rules between what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. If you're really trying to do things that completely bypass the App Store, you will absolutely get in massive trouble. If you're really trying to do some level of dynamic capabilities or A/B testing, they seem to not be as worried about that.
So dynamic Objective-C is verboten. Dynamic JavaScript seems to be okay if you exercise common sense and how much you...
Yeah, I mean, clearly if you're trying to get away from the App Store distribution, that's a different set of issues. But it's a very gray. There's no, you can't write the rules down and say if you do this, it's okay, and if you do that, it's not. That's the problem with an App Store controlled by Apple.